Have you ever tried to get closure from a narcissist and you end up only getting it dragged out further, getting sucked back into the relationship, or just never getting the answers to the questions that you have? A lot of times, when a narcissist either promises closure or when you're trying to look for closure, it never happens. We're going to talk through some of the reasons why and some of the things that's actually going on underneath the surface today in this video when we're talking through not getting closure with a narcissist ever. If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness about narcissistic abuse. I break people free from trauma bonds, from the obsessive thinking about toxic people, from that crazy guilty feeling in one sense. It keeps pulling you back to someone that you know you don't want to be with, but you don't know how to live without. A lot of times this leaves people distraught, confused, distressed, depressed, so many different things that leave you at a place of like, I don't know what to do. I try to help people understand that there's a way to break free and how to do that. If I can help you with this, go to rawmotivations.com today to be able to learn more. When we talk about this piece of no closure with a narcissist, sometimes it's a piece that people are looking and waiting to be able to think, hey, maybe something is going to happen. And it typically comes down to, first off, this illusion of there being resolution. Now, what I mean by this is sometimes survivors think that seeking closure from a toxic person is going to provide the answers that they need for emotional healing. That typically would make sense. However, when we're dealing with narcissistic abuse, sometimes there are no answers that are actually going to make sense. Why? Because a lot of the stuff that a narcissist does doesn't even make logical sense. There's times when I'm talking with clients that I have to be able to lay it down very clearly and say, hey, part of what you're struggling with right now is because you're trying to understand a toxic mindset through your non-toxic brain, and it doesn't make sense. It's because part of it doesn't even match up sometimes into logic. It just matches up to one person thinking what they want to do in that moment and responding however they want to respond. So sometimes it's hard because you're looking for closure with something that doesn't really make sense in the frame of reference, in your mindset, in the thought process. The problem is, like, people look for this aspect of healing and looking for closure from the toxic person and oftentimes do not find it. A lot of times it will be because you're looking for the narcissist to actually communicate to you what they did wrong. Think of it for a moment. Like, when you think of closure, what does that actually look like? Does it look like you sitting down and having a conversation with him? Does it look like him actually admitting that he cheated on you, telling you the reasons why he cheated on you, telling what's going on? And you have to understand is you think that would help. However, the narcissist typically is never going to do this. Now, why? Because the narcissist isn't going to expose themselves of being wrong, of doing something bad, of bringing out this shame and guilt in their life that they don't want to even tap into. So oftentimes you're going to be looking for, let me get answers. Let me understand from him why he did this. Let me just have him admit. And the problem is he never will. Narcissists are incredibly skilled at manipulating situations to create this illusion that there might be a resolution and then have it switch. And all of a sudden you're back in the relationship. Oftentimes you're stuck again, just emotionally going back and forth with this person. Sometimes you'll have a narcissist that will reach out saying that they want to provide closure, that they want to actually give you closure from the relationship, answer questions, help you move on. They want closure, so many different aspects of it. And then when you get into the conversation, you realize there's not really any closure here. It's just another future fake. It's another progression. It's another stretch of the imagination to be able to keep you back in their grip of abuse and to keep you stuck. So think of it this way, like you might go to your narcissistic ex-partner hoping to have just an honest conversation to find closure, to find like what actually happened, what went wrong, why weren't you good enough, etc., etc. And instead of there being closure, he skillfully redirects everything, leaving you with more questions than actually getting answers. This is what we see more common than not, of where you walk into a quote-unquote closure conversation and you walk out with more questions and more confusion. Part of it stems from this aspect that the narcissist isn't going to be honest to you. Like he's not going to be actually honest saying, this is what happened, this is what I did, this is why I did it. And typically because of how it'll make him feel if he's actually honest. Majority of narcissists will run away from shame, from guilt, from this aspect of like, I don't want people to know who I actually am, because if they did, then they would reject me. So a lot of times there's no honesty there because it has to be hidden. Second thing I want to point out is the game of control. Now, I mentioned this briefly earlier that sometimes you have a narcissist that will reach out to you saying, oh, I want to get closure, or I want to give closure. Like, hey, let's wrap things up. And it seems like it would be, hey, this would be a nice way to end the relationship. We can get on the same page. We'll be good to go. We can move forward. And you'd think, hey, this is going to happen, but it doesn't. A lot of times this is this piece of control where a narcissist still wants to control the narrative. Think for a moment, like if he reaches out and he's like, hey, I want to provide closure, and then he meets with you, and then you're not satisfied with that closure, even though it's not closure, he can tell other people that he tried. He can tell the people that I tried to meet with her, she went a little crazy on me. Like he can tell people that he put in the effort, even though there's not actually any effort or truth there. But for a narcissist, it's like, oh, well, now I won't look bad because I've at least done this. I met with her. I did what I said I was going to do. I did what she wanted, all these things. But in reality, it's just to maintain control. Now, a lot of times, narcissists trying to maintain control of the narrative, of how people think about him, of how people look at him, of how people like respond to what he's done. So he's like, if I can do this, maybe I can control the narrative saying like, no, that didn't happen. That's not that big of a deal, and misdirect you and confuse you to a place that it doesn't seem like it really matters. So sometimes narcissists might use some of these encounters just to beef up their ego, make them feel better, and end up leaving you feeling powerless, putting them back in a place of control and power over you. Now, this hard part is when you go into a quote unquote closure conversation with a narcissist, you might be like, I'm going to confront him. I'm going to tell him what's what. I'm going to tell him like all these different things. And you might take this opportunity just to exert his control over you, belittling you for even bringing it up, saying, hey, it's in the past is in the past. Like, why are you bringing up these mistakes now? And leaves you walking away from the conversation emotionally drained. And then you're left confused, being like, why did I even try to do that? Now I feel more confused. Now I feel more beat down. Now I feel like I have no closure, but it just continued this whole conversation even more. Has any of this happened? So like, if this has happened to you, just leave a comment down below to let other people know they're not alone. Because we run into this so many times when people are looking for closure and they're trying to find it and they haven't been able to. Like they've been looking, they've been trying, they've been like, why won't he give me closure? And when it comes down to it, a lot of times when you're looking for closure, you're looking for the other person to admit what they did. A narcissist is not going to admit that he did something wrong. He's not going to admit that he hurt you. He's not going to admit that he lied to you. And even if he did admit one of those things, it's not going to come with an actual apology or change behavior. So you need to understand that what you're looking for, this aspect of closure for your life, is not going to be there. Instead, I want you to understand that you can find closure within you. True closure is hardly ever possible with a narcissistic person. The effective closure, the true, honest closure, comes from you. It involves you understanding that you don't need his validation to move forward. You don't need his acknowledgement of the problem to move forward. You don't need another layer of lies from the narcissist for you to move forward. What you need is you to be able to focus on the facts of the situation and to move forward in truth. Now, what I mean by that is the facts of the situation, understanding, hey, this is how he treated me. This is how he loved me. This is how he didn't care about me. This is how he cheated on me. This is how he gaslit me. And understanding, hey, this is just reality. The hard part is for people to be able to separate, even if it's for a moment, to separate the facts from the feelings so that they can actually sit with the facts and be like, okay, this is actually what happened. Regardless of how you feel about it, this is what happened. Then you can bring the feelings back of like, okay, that's how I feel about it. I feel awful because this happened. Totally get that. But you need to be able to look at the facts first to be able to see, okay, this is the reality. The majority of survivors are running away from the reality of it, meaning they're never going to get closure because you're running away from the thing that you need to understand to get closure. So think of it this way. Sometimes you'll have someone who is running away from the truth of like, instead of like looking at the actual facts of the situation, they want to believe their own lies. They want to believe a story in their head of saying, oh, this is what it actually was. It wasn't that bad. He didn't mean it this way. And you start to tell yourself all these different things that aren't actually true. And when you start to do that, you separate yourself from reality. So getting back to the actual facts, this is what happened. This is what he did. Sometimes we'll have exercises where we'll tell people, hey, sit down and write down 25 things that he did to you. And you're like, whoa, I've never actually seen it on paper, because it's different. Once you start writing it down, you start to see the reality of this is what's been happening in your life. And when you start looking at a list like that, you can be like, I don't actually need closure from him, because this list is more than enough facts to be able to tell me, hey, I shouldn't be in this relationship. And this is something that this person showed that they didn't care at all. Now, it's not a bad thing to want answers. A lot of people will consume a lot of narcissistic content trying to get answers. But at the end of the day, you can only consume so many answers. And even in consuming all those answers, it's not always going to provide you healing. What you need is a scripted, step-by-step process to be able to heal and to be able to have the focus turn from the narcissist that has been on for such a long period of time back to you. You find closure by accepting that their actions are a reflection of their issues, not of your worth. I want to encourage you to make those steps to help you move forward today. You can do so by going to rawmotivations.com. We'd love to talk to you there. We'd love to have you jump into one of our challenges and to move forward finding closure for you without having to rely on anyone else.